The Louisville men and women's basketball teams are back in action this week, and we'll talk about both of those previews on this episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credential media member for Cardinal Sports Zone. Also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to personally thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. This episode is going to be dedicated to the men's and women's basketball team. We'll start out with the men's team as they travel to Winston-Salem on Saturday to take on the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. We'll preview that matchup and analyze whether or not the Cardinals can beat Steve Forbes' team for the second time this season. We'll then transition into the women's basketball side of things where the Cardinals defeated Pittsburgh 66-55 on Thursday. We'll also preview the regular season finale in South Bend against Notre Dame on Sunday. We'll start out with the men's basketball side of things. The Cardinals looking to sweep the Wake Forest Demon Deacons when they play host to the team coming up here in probably just around 24 hours. They will play the Cardinals at, checking the time, I don't know why I didn't have that. It's 7 o'clock, so it's over 24 hours. The Demon Deacons 21-8 on this season. It's one of the teams that I think, they've been playing pretty well. This season, a big shocker, in Steve Forbes' second season. Very like I mentioned on this podcast when we talked about Steve Forbes and his candidacy for the Louisville head men's basketball open position. I'm a huge fan of him as a coach. He's known for turning programs around. He wins games. He's a player's coach. Right now, Wake Forest is, I believe, tied for fifth in the conference with Virginia at 11-7, 21-8 overall. Like I said, they are just a game and a half out of fourth place, third place, Miami and North Carolina sitting right there. However, the Demon Deacons have struggled thus far here in the past 5 games. In the past 5 games, they're 3-2. They've lost 3 out of their last 4. Now, arguably, they lost to Miami, who is ahead of them in the standings. Lost a nail biter by 2 points in Cameron Indoor against Duke. Defeated Notre Dame 79-74, who is currently second in the conference. And then they had a loss to Clemson 80-69, which was kind of a head scratcher there. But overall, when you look back to that matchup the first time around at the KFC Yum Center, it was I believe it was right at the end of December. So Louisville hadn't necessarily been playing all that well. The game against Kentucky had gotten canceled or postponed at the time, but ultimately it's canceled now due to a positive COVID test. I don't want to speculate on the numbers for that or how many guys tested positive, but overall that game was not able to be played. So the Cardinals came back in action against Wake Forest. They were trailing at the intermission and then ended up scoring 37 points against Steve Forbes' team in the second half for a 4-point victory overall. Louisville was 10 of 22 from behind the arc. Wake Forest, however, just under 26%. The Cardinals also shot 34 free throws compared to Wake Forest's 18. They were comparable in both under shooting 40% from the field. Louisville out-rebounded Wake by 4. 11 turnovers for Louisville, 7 for Wake Forest. Noah Locke led the Cardinals in that matchup with 17 points. It was an overall solid game. Sam Williamson had 12, Malik Williams with 11, Mason Faulkner with 11, etc. For Wake Forest, Alondez Williams not necessarily playing all that well in that game. 4 for 14 from the field. He had 15 points. They had 3 starters in double figures with Williamson, and LaRavia also had double figures as well. However, this is a game that I'm not necessarily sure that the Cardinals are going to be able to pull out. Look, I understand that any team can win on any given day. Louisville has shown the ability to, play teams tough. They played North Carolina tough twice. They played Duke tough. Virginia was, a couple possessions away from being a very interesting game. Notre Dame, they got close to maybe trying to pull it off the first time around, but ultimately got beat. Just going down Miami was a close game as well. So Louisville can play close with any team in this conference. They've shown that thus far. I'm not saying that Wake Forest is going to come in and they're going to dominate Louisville. However, the Cardinals have shown at times that, when things aren't necessarily going their way, I'm not going to say they fold, but they've had some, big deficit losses this season. Overall, statistically looking at where the teams are at heading into, the last handful of games this season, they both give up exactly 69.4 points per game. Wake Forest shoots about 6% better. They both rebound pretty much essentially the same. Wake Forest averages a little bit over a block and 3 assists per game. The thing for me is the fact that, yes, they allow the exact same amount of points per game. Wake Forest scores exactly 10 more points per game than the Cardinals. Alondes Williams leading the way here, 19.7 points per game, 6.8 rebounds, 5.1 assists per contest, respectively. He's the player to watch for here for the Demon Deacons, 6'5", senior guard out of Milwaukee. He has been very, very solid this season, one of the best players in the ACC so far. He's really been, one of the players that is going to make some all-ACC teams. He's shooting the ball over 50% from the field, so he's the player to watch for here for Wake Forest. He's definitely going to be a tough one to guard for the Cardinals. When you look at Louisville on their end of the spectrum, sorry, I was getting a little parched. That's the one thing about these podcasts. I love doing these podcasts. They're some of my favorite things, but a 30-minute monologue sometimes can take its toll on your vocal cords. So I apologize for the little break in action. But the Cardinals focusing on the player to watch for here for Louisville. I think Noah Locke is the player, for the Cardinals that I had my eye on. The past handful of games, he's seemingly shooting the ball better. We saw what he did in the first matchup with the Demon Deacons. He led the team with 17 points, shot the ball well from not only the field but from behind the arc too. He's a player that if he's scoring the way that he has shown he can score this season, this Louisville offense is on a different dynamic. Their trajectory is a little bit different. So I think Noah Locke is the player to watch for here. In terms of keys to the game for the Cardinals, it really just kind of comes down to, seeing what worked in that first matchup. And I think that if the Cardinals can replicate that in terms of getting to the line and also shooting the ball well from deep, it bodes well for the Cardinals in this matchup. However, I think that's kind of why I'm very hesitant that, although the Cardinals did end up winning against this team earlier on in the season, it was a 4-point victory. I think that, despite losing 3 out of the last 4, Wake Forest is one of the best teams in the conference. They've shown that this season. Steve Forbes has his guys playing very well. I just feel like, Louisville shooting the ball over 45% from deep in that first matchup. I think we shot 16 more free throws and only won by 4 points, and you had to score 47 in the second half to get that done. So that's where my hesitancy lies in terms of a prediction. I don't think that either of those, I don't think they're going to shoot over 45% from 3. I don't think they're going to shoot over 30 free throws, especially not on the road. I think Wake Forest wins this one. I do think that the Cardinals have the talent. They have, the effort that they've been showing to make this a close game, especially, down the stretch. I think that the Demon Deacons end up winning this one, let's say by about anywhere from 4 to 7 points is kind of where I'm gravitating towards. So that's we'll obviously recap that contest on the Monday episode of this show. We're going to spend the rest of the episode talking about the women's basketball team, where the Cardinals defeated Pittsburgh 66-55 on the road on Thursday evening. We'll talk about that here in just a second as we talk about our friends first at Run Your Pool. Look, March Madness is only a couple weeks away. That means you need to start thinking now about where you're going to be running your brackets this year. Along with standard brackets, Run Your Pool offers game types like Survivor or Pick X. Both are really fun in their own way. They have options to edit scoring, and they offer more intel to make your picks, all stuff you won't find at ESPN or CBS. Clearly, we believe Run Your Pool, because like I said, we're running our brackets through them ourselves. There's no truer test than that. If you want to play against us for a shot at a cash prize, join us at runyourpool.com/lockedon. And while you're there, create your own pool for your friends and family. Enter Pure Madness at checkout for $10 off your custom pool. Once again, that's runyourpool.com/lockedon for your chance to win a cash prize. Also want to talk about our friends over at Built Bar. It's usually the time of year, going into March where I've kind of given up on my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. The main thing they have going right now are the Puffs, which are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, and they're not just a protein bar. They're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate, as are all of the Built Bar products. They're low-calorie, high in protein, so you're able to replace your candy bars that you usually eat with these. They're better. A typical candy bar also can have anywhere from 200 to 300 calories, while Built Bars have 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. And there's a handful of different flavors. So do yourself a favor. Go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Once again, let's use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. As always, I want to say thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, including YouTube. There's now a new YouTube page, so be sure to check that out. 5 days a week, your team every day. The women's basketball team went on the road against the Pittsburgh Panthers on Thursday evening and came out victorious 66-55. It wasn't necessarily a pretty win, but as I say, a win is a win is a win. I'd rather have an ugly win rather than a pretty loss. And this was a matchup that, if you paid attention to yesterday's episode, I predicted about a 22 to 23 point victory for Louisville. The things that I thought that they were going to do well in this contest, they didn't necessarily do all that great. When you look at what happened overall, a couple things stick out. Number one, the perimeter shooting for Louisville. They pretty much struggled from that aspect. Only 2 of 16, 12.5%. Pittsburgh, on the other hand, shot 38.5% from deep, but only attempted 13 shots, so they made 5 of them. The big statistic here, I guess you could say there's 2 of them. 35 turnovers the first time around for the Pittsburgh Panthers, which probably could be an anomaly. They turned the ball over 19 times in this contest compared to Louisville's 10. And when you look at the overall rebounding margin, Pittsburgh, we heard in the preview from DataScribe on ESPN.com that the Panthers are one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country. Well, on Thursday evening, they out-rebounded Louisville 53-41, 22-16 in terms of the offensive rebounding margin. For the Cardinals, Emily Ingsler led the way, 17 points, but 8 for 19 from the field. 15 rebounds, 3 blocks, 2 steals. Haley Van Lith also in double figures with 13. They were the only 2 in double digits. Kiana Smith struggled from the field, 6 points. Chelsea Hall also with 6 points. Olivia Cochran, 9 points. Liz Dixon with 7. Alana Smith, 6. And Peyton Verhulst with 3. Pittsburgh, on the other hand, you had Brown with 11, King with 11, and Strother with 11 as well. So in this matchup, it was one of those to where it's not necessarily a convincing win. As I mentioned, any team can win on any given day. Going on the road in conference play is always going to be tough. We've seen, pretty much ever since Louisville's been in the ACC, that even if a team hasn't necessarily been playing all that well or they're not all that great of a squad to begin with, they still can put up quite a fight. The Panthers came into last night, losers of their last 7 contests. They hadn't won a game since late January. They're going to, basically end their regular season with a chance to try to get back in the win column. But Louisville on the season moves to 24-3. they will end the season against Notre Dame, which we'll preview that matchup in the final segment of the show here in just a second. When I watched this game against the Panthers, I think it was one of the instances of I don't like the phrase of playing down to competition, but I just felt like there was a little bit of sloppiness on offense. The shots just weren't falling, and Pittsburgh, although statistically, if you look at the statistical parameters, if you look at the field goal percentage, the 3-point percentage, the turnovers and stuff like that, you would find it hard to believe that the Cardinals only won this game by 11. But the key thing here was that the fact that Pittsburgh had 22 offensive rebounds, which for Louisville to be able to try to make sure that they're able to capitalize on good defense, they have to be able to convert that over into offense. Louisville shot over 10% better than Pittsburgh from the field. A contest to where, a win is a win. I think that's kind of what I'm coming back to, is that a lot of these wins in conference, what really defines a team is even when they're not necessarily playing at their best level, being able to get it done, especially on the road. I don't care how good a team is, because at the end of the day, all that really matters is the win and loss records. So at the end of the day, every conference win is a solid win. Just another one, trying to get ready for postseason play here next week. We'll have all that coverage here on the Locked On Louisville podcast as well, previewing, recapping and stuff like that. The key takeaway for me in this game was, the Cardinals were able to come out on top despite, a less than desirable performance on both ends of the court. Although they forced a lot of turnovers, didn't necessarily shoot the ball well from deep. There wasn't really one player that played all that great. Yes, Emily Inkster had 17 points, but it took her 19 shots to get there. And the fact 12 offensive rebounds, that's something. 22 offensive rebounds and getting out rebounded by 12 overall. That's something that Louisville has to correct moving forward, because they're going to go up against some teams in the tournament, both the ACC and the NCAA, that maybe have a little bit more of a size advantage in the post, where they're going to have to do better on the boards. And that's definitely one of those to where, for a team that had the same amount of rebounds the first time around in the first matchup, to be out rebounded by 12 in the second one kind of makes you wonder. I'm interested to see how Jeff Walz can kind of be able to improve off of that. But the Cardinals will now turn their attention to South Bend, the regular season finale, on Sunday afternoon at noon against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. We'll talk about that ranked matchup here in just a second after we talk about our friends at BetOnline. Look, football might be over for the season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fire coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all of your sports betting needs, and it remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. It remains your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline is where the game starts. Final segment of the week, the Cardinals taking on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, the team that they had already beaten earlier in the season, just a couple weeks ago, 73-47 at the KFC Yum Center. So it's going to be a matchup to where, looking at what Notre Dame has done, they are winners of 3 of their last 5. Their 2 losses come to Louisville, 73-47. Florida State 70-65. Overall, the Fighting Irish, one of the more solid teams in the ACC. They're currently 4th in the conference, half game out of 3rd. They just beat the Virginia Tech Hokies, who are a half game up on them in the standings. They did that a couple weeks ago. 68-55. They beat Georgia Tech on the road, 72-66. So I have to caution fans that are listening to this to not fall victim to the line of thinking that this is going to be an easy result just because the Cardinals won 73-47 to 47 in that game the first time around. We saw against Pittsburgh, it was an 81-39 victory. The Cardinals only won by 11 the second time around. So playing on the road, playing on Senior Day up in South Bend, the regular season finale, it's never been a truly easy place to play. So you have to, really, come in focused. One thing that worked for the Cardinals very well the first time around was perimeter defense. The Fighting Irish 2 for 22 from behind the arc. That's good for 9.1%. That's incredibly bad. Notre Dame was also 31.7% from the field. Citron, the freshman, led the way with 13 points. Miles had 11. Westbelt had 10 as well. However, Sam Brunell only played 3 minutes. It's going to be interesting to see, if that's going to be the case this time, or if she's going to play some more. But ultimately, Notre Dame basically played with only 6 players outside of 3 minutes from Brunell. So at the end of the day, I think that for the Cardinals, it's going to be a matter of doing what you did best in that first matchup. I'm not saying that you have to hold them to some staggeringly low shooting percentages, but the fact that the Cardinals out-rebounded Notre Dame by 18, 50-32, I think that's the one of the keys to the game is to win the battle on the glass on both ends of the court. Also, I think it's taking care of the ball. In that first matchup, it's been a tale of the season. We've seen Louisville force a ton of turnovers, but not necessarily be able to take advantage of that because they also turned the ball over a decent amount in that same game. Notre Dame had 16 the first time around. The Cardinals had 13. Overall, like I mentioned, this is going to be a very, very tough game. Notre Dame's usually a team that shoots the ball very well. They move extremely well on offense without the ball. Very solid in terms of setting screens. I love watching Notre Dame play. They play with high effort on both ends of the court, and they're a team that never truly believes they've lost a game. They're one of the teams that you have to play to the final whistle. They beat NC State in South Bend 69-66. They beat Virginia Tech in South Bend, Miami in South Bend, and North Carolina in South Bend. So you see the trend, right? You see the fact that, this is a team that plays extremely well at home. So despite defeating the Fighting Irish 73-47 the first time around, I would venture out and say that this is going to be a very, very close contest for the Cardinals. So in terms of the players to watch for Louisville, I think that I'm going to go with Kiana Smith here. Hasn't necessarily been shooting the ball all that well from the field over the past handful of games. Did well against Virginia Tech on last Sunday, but in the last 6 to 7, maybe 8 games, hasn't necessarily been that efficient from the floor. Louisville is going to need her to turn it around, and what better way to do so than the last game of the regular season as they gear up for the postseason push. This is a game to where it could come down to just a couple shots, and if Kiana Smith is on her A game and shooting the ball well from the field, I think at the end of the day, this she's the player to watch for here for Louisville. In terms of Notre Dame and what they've been able to do, there's a couple different players that you can kind of focus on here. They're a very balanced attack. Olivia Miles is she's averaging 13.9 points per game, 5.8 rebounds per game. Maya Dotson as well. I'm going to go with Maddie Westbelt here, the 6'3 sophomore from Kettering, Ohio, 11.7 points per game. She's third on the team in scoring, 6.2 rebounds, 1.5 assists, shooting the ball just under 50% from the field. With her size as a player who can, shoot the ball pretty solid from behind the arc, just under 40%. For her size and rebound the ball well. Two, she's a possible matchup nightmare for Louisville. I do think Emily Inksler is a very good defensive matchup for her. But she's a player that if she's scoring the ball well, along with the other players, I think Maddie Westbelt is the player to watch for here for Notre Dame. I think that the Cardinals are going to win this game in South Bend on Sunday. I don't think it's going to be by all that much. I'm going with a Louisville victory by 5 to 6 points here. I think that Notre Dame is going to come out and playing very well. and the Cardinals will use a solid second half run to defeat the Fighting Irish. But we talked about the men's basketball preview against Wake Forest, the women's basketball recap against Pittsburgh, and the women's basketball preview against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Obviously, there will be 2 episodes on Monday to end the month. We'll talk about the recap from the weekend, also talk about the women's basketball journey in the ACC tournament next week. Couple quick shout-outs first to the Cardinal Sports Zone podcast. You can check that out at cardinalsportszone.com. As always, I want to say thank you for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. But that's going to wrap up this week of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Everyone have a great day. Have a great weekend. Go Cards. Hopefully we get some wins to talk about on Monday. We will see you right back here when the weekend ends.